lost people online, have we?
Could you just mention the bit about Southfields again, because I lost the sound for a minute then. I didn't hear what you said about that.
Right, yeah, but Ben's happy to go into more detail on that.
So just the element around Southfield, which is mentioned in the report. I'm sure most people will know, and everyone will probably have heard locally. So the trustees of Southfield, which is a standalone academy, and the DFE are consulting on its closure at the end of this academic year. We were expecting a formal decision this week by the minister, whether it would close or not. That's now been deferred to January. So we're still in a position where there is not a formal decision that Southfield will close. But what we have done, so the only role that the council has in that entire discussion is to try and offer support and advice and guidance to parents about what next, and to make sure there are sufficient places within the local area. So the impact that we have articulated in the report is around the impact on the next nearest schools, where we know parents have applied for places who will need to recruit to staff they were not expecting at the beginning of the year. Now, the DFE, I believe, should fund that. The DFE's response at the moment is no, that's your responsibility, and it will work its way out as your recruitment works its way out, as you, in theory, have one less academy, etc. I personally don't think that's right. I think the DFE should have given us, or those schools, the support to recruit those additional staff to ensure a smooth transition for those pupils. We still don't have the formal decision. What we're putting in is a growth fund that protects those schools who are going to have this big intake of children they were not expecting. There's some small capital works that need to be done to convert rooms into suitable classrooms. There's TAs and teachers that need to be recruited. That's what that element is. I'm just conscious that we're making a decision before a formal decision's been made, but I think it's critical to do that. And I think it looks quite clear what decision that the Secretary of State will make about that closure.
Okay, thanks, Ben. So are there any, first of all, any questions around the growth fund in particular? Yes.
Yeah, that's my perspective. That will be reversed at that growth fund request. I said we're expecting that decision to be made. It hasn't been deferred again.
Yeah, can I ask that people use the microphone, because otherwise we can't hear online.
So the question was around, if the decision is not to close, would we reverse this decision around this growth fund? I think the obvious answer for me is yes. However, unlikely. I think it's a good question.
I think technically that we'd end up with the funds in the growth fund budget, and it would roll over to next year.
Yeah.
And then be an extra part of the school's block formula next year.
And with this change, does this have an effect on the any capping or scaling in relation to the main DSG? This is part of the DSG, isn't it?
Yes, so it's essentially a top slice to the school's block to create the growth fund. So
Yeah.
it reduces what's available for the formula in this year.
Okay. Okay, well, as I say, there are I think 3 distinctive things in there, 2 of them which from the consultation looked in favour of the proposals. The one bringing the policy in line with the national requirements had a majority of respondents happy with that. And actually the bit around the additional bit in the growth fund in relation to Southfields had support.
We didn't consult on that part because that's been an addition since the consultation to schools.
Okay. I'm bemused by the fact that there hasn't been the support for increasing the rates in line with the costs. Generally speaking, through the years, that's happened. Do we think there's any misunderstanding of the implication, or just generally an unwillingness to put any more money into the growth fund and out of the general?
I think it's difficult to see from the comments that it isn't clear what that decision was for all of the people who voted against. But I would imagine it's because it means there's more funding going to everybody else.
Yeah. Has anyone got any comments on that online in relation to your views on that increasing rates before we vote on those? No? Or in the room? Okay, well, we'll go through the various parts of it then. Ah, brilliant. So the first one is the update of the growth fund policy to bring it in line with the national requirements. Is everyone happy with that or in favour of that? If you just, yeah, put your hands up or nod, yeah. And in the room, yeah, okay, that's fine. To increase the growth fund rates, now this is where the consultation's obviously not been in favour of that. So I'm going to ask you to vote whether you are in favour of increasing the gross fund rate, so i.e. ignoring the responses in the consultation. Are you happy? Does that make sense? So the vote is, are you happy to increase the growth fund rates, which the consultees weren't? So anyone, hand up if you're happy to increase the rates. Hands up if you don't want to increase the rates, which is where the consultees' views were.
I think there's a real, I don't think people understand this part of the question.
Right,
And I
yeah,
think that's why you've got a real on to with the answers here. And I think it's that understanding of what the impact of increasing the rate will have.
yeah,
I think that's what's happened here.
yeah. Okay, well, yes, that could be within the respondees. So it's, yeah, so essentially the amount available for the growth fund to schools that are growing and meet the criteria to benefit from that, their costs will have gone up in line with the pay settlements. If the rates don't go up in line with the pay settlements, then there won't be enough money for them to be able to meet the needs that have been identified within the growth fund policy. The counter to that is if any more money that goes into this means that there will be less money available in the pot generally. So when there is a capping and scaling of the funds available to all schools, then that will mean there will be slightly less there. Do we have a number for what the difference is, that 6.5%?
It's about 75,000.
It's about 75,000. So that's the difference across the 300 odd million of DSG. Ian.
I suspect it might be partly because schools themselves were not funded that 6.5% increase. So the increase in our budget has not reflected that increase in cost, and therefore why should the growth fund go up by 6.5%? So I think there's probably some uncertainty with regard to that and disquiet because we had to find 4% ourselves of that 6.5% increase. So that's probably why you've got a disagreement there.
Yeah. No, well, that's, yeah.
The way that we form the rates as well is it's a sort of, when we're looking to increase them, we use a sort of midpoint on the scale.
Yeah.
So that's another consideration. And some years in the past, we haven't asked for any increase. So
Yeah.
it's not an annual request.
So I think, does that provide more clarity for everyone? I think the sense I'm getting is that we're erring towards the consultees' responses. Is that the feeling? So on the vote, I'll ask again, if we are not in favour of increasing the rates, if you will put your hand up if you're not in favour. That's a majority there, and I'll vote with those. So it's a unanimous, we will leave the rates as they are. We will bring the policy in line with the national funding formula, but not the rates. The rates will stay. Right. That's fine. That was a bit of a half one, yeah. So the included the, what was the next one? The weighted numbers. Include the weighted numbers in the consultation document. I think there was general agreement around that, wasn't there?
That's right, yes, there were 16 responses in favour and 9 against.
Yeah. So are we happy with that? Happy with that around the table? Happy with that part of it? I can see, I think everyone nodding on that.
Did you have a question or was that a
And then the last one, which is, I guess is slightly different because we haven't agreed the cost, is to agree the net growth fund budget, but it won't be at 1.17 now, will it? Because we haven't agreed the 6.5%.
So that would become 1.1.
So that will become 1.1. So that last vote is effectively to add some money in for
The Southfields,
Southfields.
but also to set the budget because that is schools forum decision each year.
Yeah. Okay, now that looks reasonable to me. I'm saying, great, thank you. That's everyone. Dan, you happy with that? Yeah, fantastic. Super. Okay, the next one.
It's a central school services budget. So as we know, there's a separate block that funds this. This isn't a top slice to this schools block. It's completely separate. And there are services within ongoing services, part of that block, and historical block, which is being unwound, and those services reducing and gradually transferring to general fund. So within this, there's a very strong sort of vote in favour from the consultation, with 21 in agreement of continuing the existing central services, and just 3 disagreeing. And they were listed in the original paper in October and in the consultation.
Yeah, James, it's outside of Dan. Who else can vote on this one? Eliza. Thanks.
This is Central School Services.
That's
Yeah.
This is all members.
Oh, it's all members on that one. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's delegations. Okay, well, the consultation was quite clear. Is there any comments or anyone? Dan?
Sorry, just a question, might be a really silly one. Again, Beth, just if you can just point me in the right direction in terms of making sure I respond correctly. Is this the or it might be later on, the additional
No,
is that
these
later
are
on?
entirely separate. Yeah, so there are 4 blocks of the dedicated schools grant, and this is a central block that's entirely for the sort of central school services.
Okay.
It doesn't impact your individual schools' budgets.
Okay, so that question that obviously you and I have communicated about, that's coming later on.
Yes, that's under the de-delegations items.
Okay, sorry, apologies, Beth, but thank you for clarifying.
That's all right. You're not the only one actually who's asked that question. I think from some of the responses, I think there's maybe we need to do a bit of an explanation at one of the schools forums about the different funding blocks.
Yeah, I just received a couple of emails from colleagues, fellow head teachers that have just asked that question. So I thought my understanding was incorrect, but okay, yeah, but thank you very much for clarifying.
Okay, so I think we can look at voting on this one then for the schools central block, and the proposition is: do we agree that the budgets are shown in the schools consultation document continue to be funded for another year? So do we agree with everyone here and online? Yes. Okay, I think that's fine. I think Becky's in. Can't see you, Becky. So if you can put your finger, that's it. Lovely, thank you. That's that one.
So then we're moving on to the first de-delegation, which is looking at the trade union facility time. And these are top slices to individual schools' budgets for maintained schools, our primary schools. And there were 3 options that we proposed, and we have representatives from the trade unions here to speak on this item. So the responses, the options, sorry, were to continue the 23-24 rate of £3.21 per pupil. Option 2, to increase the rate to maintain the current budget with a rate of £3.53, which reflects the dropping numbers of maintained school pupils. And the third option, sorry, no, there were just 2 options. Apologies, that's the next item.
All right.
So there are 2 options, £3.21 or £3.53. The majority responded with 24 responding option 1 and 9 went for the higher rate, £3.53.
Okay, so there's obviously Dan and Eliza will be voting on this, but before that happens, Richard, do you want to add some comments on?
Yes, thank you. Richard Paul, school convener for Unison. I'd just like some a question to Beth and Rose if I can, and then I want to address some of the facility time comments on page 39 of your pack. Firstly, can I just ask Beth that if it were to be maintained at £3.21, would that mean a reduction in union facility time?
Yes, it would result in a reduction in the budget, given the number of schools that are due to convert.
Thank you.
Year.
Is what I'd like to do, Chair, please, is just some respond to some of the comments on page 39 in terms of trade union facility time. Can I ask Dan and Eliza, I've got no, where it says in those comments less risks involved, I've got no context in which that is. Can you just have a think about what less risk involved? I haven't got any context, whether you'll be able to help me with that. Firstly, some of the comments I've heard from around the room is it's difficult to vote on something without knowing the impact off of it. And I'm not sure it is realised the impact of reducing the facility time from the schools form budget. I'm not employed by Unison, I'm employed by the local authority, and it's the facility time budget, the delegated budget that releases me from my duties to do some of the union activities. So comment 1 was trade union facility time comments. You know, as time goes on, more are committed to become an academy. What is the long-term strategy? Well, we unions have been asking this question for the last 3 years. And we feel it's important that the local authority administer the invoices to academies so we can get more money in the pot. The more money that comes into the pot from academies, the less the maintained schools have to pay. Ideally, we'd like everybody to be paying into the pot. There have been some difficulties this year with some academies thinking that they were paying into the pot when actually they weren't. We do feel going forward that the local authority needs to administrate this. In the past, they have been saying they do not have the capacity. The second one is it's going to be financially challenging for those local authority schools and trusts to continue represent a diminishing groups of cost rises. We totally understand the impact of financial constraints to schools. My union support staff, our members are ensuring children don't go hungry, whilst the support staff themselves are having to use food banks. We're acutely aware of the funding within schools. But it really concerns me that one of the comments states, as the unions are paid by their customers, I am unsure as to why schools need to contribute. There should be no payment for union activities. The money should be put into books and other resources. As I said before, I'm not employed by Unison, I'm employed by the local authority. And whilst our members do pay a membership fee for representation, That's no problem. That doesn't pay for policy reviews. That doesn't pay for pay and negotiation. That doesn't pay for reorganisation and redundancies. That doesn't pay for when we get involved with HR matters that the local authority don't know anything about. That doesn't pay for TUPE consultations. That doesn't pay for changing terms and conditions of employment. And having spoke to a number of head teachers within the local authority, I do understand that they are at their wits' end with particularly budgets. In terms of, do people understand the impact of reducing facility time? I think there is a good possibility, because maintained schools do not get a lot of support from the local authority. There's no incentive to stay with the local authority, and therefore they will be soon trooping over to an academy. If you choose to reduce facility time, we're not going to be there as part of those consultations, okay? Which means that will delay consultations. It will, legally, you have a duty to consult with the unions, and therefore it will be probably referred to our regional office that take care of the East Midlands region. The actual facility time budget pays for our time within those negotiations. When you as a local authority school want to change your policies, you have to do that through the policy subgroup, which is represented by the unions. So I'm just wondering if by voting to keep the facility, the payment the same and reducing facility time, that you are in fact turkeys voting for Christmas. There is a very vulnerable gap between schools, their HR providers, and the local authority that is having a legal impact on the local authority. And the sooner we get involved in unions, the less impact that will be. So to vote to reduce facility time means that we may not be there to consult on policies. We may not be there to consult with on TUPE consultations, and we may not be there to fill the gap with your HR providers. On the third one, less risk involved. Have you had time to think about what that could be?
Richard, I think the respondents are from a wide range of schools, not directly necessarily from the representatives.
Yeah, no, I
here.
understand that, but if it was involved in the consultations, it might just.
Yeah.
Okay. So just to finish off then, schools, one of the last comments is schools have seen a minimal increase to support staffing costs, and I feel this should be mirrored with the trade unions. And just to comment then with that, I know we don't like comparing ourselves with the North, but they are suggesting that the increase in facility time has increased at the same percentage as the teachers' pay rise increase. So that's my kind of pitch from a support staff. I want to give way now to my teaching colleagues that may wish to add to that.
Hello, hi. Thank you for allowing us to speak. So my name's Elaine Coe. I'm from the National Education Union. So we're the biggest education union. We support teachers and support staff as well. So I've got members who are teachers, who are heads, who are bursars, who are dinner ladies. You know, we've got the whole range of members. Yeah, and obviously support what Richard said. I think he's put it very well about the potential impact of this. And I'm not paid by my union. I am paid by my school, and my school is recompensed for my time that I spend attending meetings. Without that facility time, and I support hundreds of members, just to be clear. I've got thousands of members across the county, so there's a lot of people here. I take a lot of phone calls every day. I teach Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I should be teaching, just saying goodbye to year 7 right now. And I would have to go to teach every single day if it wasn't for that facilities time. And there isn't anything to fill that gap. We do have to continue to provide these services, but that would go to regional offices, as Richard has suggested it would be the same for us. The schools that contribute to facility funding, they do this to make their own lives easier. And the fact that some heads perhaps aren't sure what we do with that, I think may suggest that we're actually doing a good job in some of that, because a lot of this goes under the radar. They need to consult, as has been made clear before. There are a lot of policies that need consulting on. There are a lot of changes that need consulting on, and we do that for them. They speak to us and we consult with members so that they don't have to consult with each individual member. We feed back. So when staff want to feed back anonymously, they don't feel comfortable feeding back, we can do that for them. And when it doesn't happen, schools leave themselves open to legal challenges and tribunals. We have seen that recently, relatively recently, just before West Northampton existed, with a TUPE consultation where there wasn't sufficient consultation and there had to be compensation paid for the lack of consultation. So if we're worried about cost, I want to demonstrate that unions, we help to save those costs. We help to make those savings. The union regional officers that can come in, these are not local officers. I know this. My husband is a regional officer, but he's in Easton. He works in Norfolk in Essex. I work and have worked for 20 odd years in Northampton. I know the people that I've worked with. Some of them are heads now from the various schools. I'm invested in these schools. My children go to West Northampton schools. I work in a West Northampton school. I think most of my recent cases that I've picked up in the last few weeks have been Senkos. This reflects what's happening. I think what you just said about the rise, or the rise in the deficit, the budget deficit that's been reflected because of the number of children that we've had that have been coming through with higher needs. And as I say, I'm picking up these Senko cases. We can't afford to lose these Senkos. We can't afford for them. You know, they're feeling the pressure as the schools are feeling the pressure. And schools don't want to lose them, and this is where we can be involved. Lots of heads don't see that work that we do. So when a member of staff at your school or somebody's school needs to talk to someone at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night, they can't speak to their heads, they can't get through to HR, the regional officers turn their phones off at 6 o'clock, our national phone line closed down at 7, they speak to me, and they speak to us about their suicidal thoughts in a lot of cases. They speak to us about their threats to take the school to court. They speak to us about going to the press and going to Ofsted. And we talk them down. I talk them down from there. That's what teachers, you know, that's people who are represented, you know, here and represented. These are West Northampton schools that I'm talking about. This is confidential, but I've got names of people and, you know, the schools. These are real cases. I'm not being hyperbolic or giving you a hypothetical situation here. So the hours in disciplinary hearings that we spend on those, or that I spend on those 2 days that I've got facility time, or that's nothing to the hours that I spend preparing for those. The heads don't hear the conversations as well that I have with HR prior to the meeting or before a meeting is even set. Other heads may not share the times that they've called us to avert a problem, that they're worried about a member of staff or worried about how a policy should be implemented. HR speak to me about one member, but while I'm on the phone, can I just ask you about, and it's another case that's going on. This doesn't happen if this work moves to a regional office. This happens because I have worked hard to develop good relationships with these staff and with these HR people. The number of hours that we spent recently has increased because schools are feeling unsupported by the, you know, some of the withdrawal of HR support and having to move to different HR providers. We've had redundancy consultations where we've had to get involved because, and they've been delayed. That costs schools money when they then have to pay for another term of notice period. We get staff and support teachers back to work when they're ill. We encourage schools to find ways of supporting teachers or staff when they're struggling with workload or health. We understand the risks posed by the teacher shortage and the shortage we've got in support staff. We ensure that people are back to work as soon as possible. So at the moment, the union doesn't pay my salary. This facilities time pays for those 2 days I've got. Who pays my salary after 3:20? About now. Nobody pays that. Nobody's paying that. I'm doing that. But without that time that I get from school, I won't be able to continue with that, and that support won't be able to continue. That's why we need that facility time to stay as it is, to be able to support those members and ultimately save the schools money. That's the cost of it. Thank you. And that's to my colleague.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Robert Johnston. I'm from the NSUWT Teachers Union, so I just represent teaching staff. I'll be brief because essentially what my colleagues have put forward I agree with. And so a vote for option 2, from our point of view, is a reduction in our ability to do our jobs because we would have less funding in real terms. So it's effectively a cut for us, and less facilities time means we're able to support them as less effectively, be it tutoring, be it casework, HR issues, redundancies, etc. So we would like you to vote for option 2, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the representations. I don't think anyone who completed the consultations would want to necessarily have to make the choices that I know that Eliza and Dan will have to make. And Dan, you might want to comment on that in a minute, or Eliza yourself. And there are, you know, the funding landscape is such that difficult decisions need to be made. But I know that schools appreciate and the sector appreciates the work of the unions and the work that's done, and the contribution that makes. But the forum members will have to make decisions based on a balance of conflicting priorities. So I'll ask, has anyone at all got any questions or any comments you'd like? Eliza?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the work that you do is unprecedented, and we do appreciate that. Can I just ask, how many academies do actually buy in? Because we don't know that. Are many academies actually buying into the services?
I'm wondering if Rose Online knows the figure, because I can't remember off the top of my head. It has been very small it's sort of
So
still
what do
double
academies
figures,
do
but
then?
it's about.
Sorry, I'm an academy and we wanted to buy into the time, but we've never had an invoice from the local authority with regards to that. I mentioned that we did want to buy into the time, but we've never received anything from them. So there might be other academies.
Those who we've been notified who want to buy in, the invoices are being raised. We've had a technical issue so the invoices will be raised for those who've said, and we have considered that.
So
as part of the
hopefully you'll have
budget.
more academies then buying in.
The ones who
therefore it'll
want
be
to
spread
buy
over
in
more schools.
are included within the modelling. So we've assumed that income, we just haven't sort of raised the invoices yet. So in modelling and financially working out the budget, those who do have notified us through the HR team that they want to buy in, that's all included in this budget setting.
Okay. I think from my point of view, it's a really difficult one to go against what the majority of my colleagues are saying, that actually to keep it at option 1, whilst we don't underestimate the work that you do. What, in terms of facility times, how much will that change then? And it will reduce, but by how much? Do we know that or not?
It's very difficult to say because it depends on how many schools convert to academies and at what point in the year, because when they convert depends on how much of that de-delegated budget we're allowed to keep and how much we have to give back as recruitment to government, but also how many academies choose to buy in. And I think that's where we need the help of the trade union reps in selling the services and getting buy-in. But also we are committed to doing the administration, but the part that's difficult for us is that salesman role.
Elaine?
No, just agree. But just to say that we obviously do these TUPE, and on the whole, we get buy-in at the point of TUPE, that isn't necessarily then followed up with the invoices. So we walk away thinking we've done quite a good sales job and people have agreed, academies have agreed. And we do have quite a few academies, for example, the school that I work in definitely pays in. We also have some individual arrangements with academies separately, but we walk away from TUPE believing we have secured buy-in, and that isn't always followed up by invoices from the council. So, or it hasn't been in the past. I know
It's not that we're not following up, it's that they're refusing to pay.
yeah, I know that's happened subsequently when we followed up.
And we've emailed every academy and we had 2 emails in response. What can we do?
Rose, yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry you can't see me, my camera's not working. To just reiterate what Beth has said, we have had a campaign to bring on academies on board to buy into the scheme, but it's only a partial answer, because the more academies that buy into the scheme, the more work there is for the trade union representatives to undertake, so that, you know, there is that trade-off. But in general terms, as an HR team, we are aware that the trade unions are very cognizant of the fact that we have got budgetary pressures. They don't want to ask for any more than inflation. And just to reiterate that there are some real advantages. Not least, you are receiving cost-effective 2-year representation with no cost, no school having to face a disproportionate cost. They do provide consistent casework expertise, and you know, they do get a fast, efficient service and often informal resolution. So if I could, you know, back up what our trade union colleagues are saying, it is a very important service that they offer.
Thank you. Richard, just briefly.
Just one final comment for me, and I understand our, you know, our representatives do, you know, a sterling job, but I'm wondering if those that were consulted with understand the actual implications of what they're voting for, in terms of what we've already said about policies, TUPE arrangements or whatever. That's not paid for by the union, that's not paid for by union fees. We do individual representation, yeah, that's paid for by union fees, but the rest is between the employer and union relationships between the local authority and the unions, and that responsibility in this case is de-delegated to yourselves. The risk, the impact is, as been stated, there may be TUPE consultations coming up. We may have to delay those because we won't get, you know, we can't backfill our time with our roles in the local authority or within our professions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Richard. I need to take a vote now on this one because we have got quite a number of things we need to move through.
Oh, there could be an option to divert the vote to the next meeting, so the unions can have a consultation directly with head teacher, with all the head teachers, so they understand the impact.
I don't think that's an option, as we need to submit our budgets to the DfE in
Yeah.
the middle of January.
Yeah, and the papers did go out, and there was a additional paper. I think Richard, you produced that went out with the consultation. So I think the consultees had the information that they needed. Whether they've interpreted it in the way that you would like is a different matter, but they have had the information. So Dan, would you?
Sorry, Chair, I appreciate you're trying to move things along, so I'll be really quick. Just for clarity, we're talking about a difference of 32 pence, aren't we, per pupil, per child? Is that correct? I'm looking at that correctly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Brilliant. Although I feel that perhaps our union colleagues were, I don't know, perhaps the way in which it presented, or maybe because things are virtual, or perhaps not received that information. What I do want to say is I've both been challenged and supported by union colleagues, and as a head teacher, I really value the contributions to schools that they make, and only from a personal perspective. So, you know, if we are voting to move things along, I would vote for option 2.
Okay.
I'm looking at the effects. It's actually not going to be hugely amount.
No,
actually, the ramification for the unions will be. So,
yeah, I kind of did the maths in the background, Eliza,
yeah,
and I think
it's not that much.
But the value that the union,
it's not going to have a significant impact.
I think, you know, for me, option two.
Option two.
Okay, well, I think that's James. So
It's hard.
if you're happy with that, that's a vote for option two then, 100%.
That's continuation of the delegation, but with a 10% increase to a rate of 3.53 per pupil.
Correct.
Unanimous.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Right, Beth, if we can.
So the second delegation school improvement grant.
Yep.
So that was a continuation of the school improvement at the £5.50 rate. And everybody that responded was in agreement, or had no opinion or didn't answer. So that's 27 in favour.
Okay, again, Eliza, Dan, this one's for you. You happy with that, Eliza?
Yeah, this is the initial first thing, the school improvement grant, not the second one, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
And so then there's an additional part to that, which is in response to the consultation questions more generally, which is a lot of feedback's been given to us through the consultation, but also through emails and work that Ben and Katie Morledge have been doing, which is that schools would like a service similar to the SIG for head teachers and governor support, but for finance. So going in where they have a bursar that leaves or is off sick and they can't recruit in time if there's an emergency like that, or sort of, I don't know, Ben can probably give more detail on the type of help.
Yeah, just very briefly, because I know we've got a lot to do. Heard it from colleagues earlier from a trade union perspective, and just I wanted to say that we do hear the frustration amongst our maintained schools around that lack of finance and HR support. We absolutely hear that. There are plans in place to work with all of our maintained schools to demonstrate what the offer is, what we can and can't do, some absolute clarity. I've already spoken to Richard about that, and I'll take that trade union link offline. So we will be speaking to all maintained schools early in the new year about the offer. We absolutely hear the frustration of decisions that have been made and the impact of that, and some schools, particularly small schools, not knowing where to turn. So we do get it. The response you've got and the proposal here is very specific about one aspect of that, which is finance. The HR aspect, we need a bit more time to think about how we might be able to do. What we've heard from schools is that the model of using people currently in the field who have the expertise, who do the job, and having that network of support to be able to pick up the phone and go, help, and have someone there who can guide, who can advise, who can signpost, and sometimes just be that moral support. That's what bursars particularly are screaming out for, and then head teachers are screaming out for. So we've put this proposal in. We've spoken to some schools about the proposal already. And schools have really pushed this as a model that they really like. It's based on that school improvement model of expertise that we can parachute in and out, as and where we do, as we do with our associate head teacher. So that's the background behind that proposal.
Yeah, please.
I think, you know, we brought this to you a few months ago, and I think, you know, all the schools that I speak to, I've got various emails here from head teachers about this particular grant and this particular £5 per pupil. I think the worry that heads have got is what this money is actually going to be used for and how. Because for some schools, yes, if you've got a new bursar in post, you do need that extra support. But for other schools, that isn't the issue. It's having the help desk. It's the fact that the council removed all the financial support services and that we actually don't know who to turn to. And the fact that the council then sends certain spreadsheets out to our bursars, but they themselves don't know how to fill them in, or they can't give us advice. So we, you know, if we agree this, we would then want a say in exactly how this is used, because it's reacting to what we actually need. I do think you've listened, but I don't want it to be a sticking plaster without actually addressing the issues that we are facing. So I think as heads, we would like a meeting, and I know some of my colleagues did go and meet with yourselves, but it's really getting to the crux of what the problem is, because it is huge. And that is a huge pressure on heads at the moment, not just in small, but in larger schools as well. And like I say, I've got a mixed reaction here because some heads are saying, yes, we do need something. Other heads are saying, I'm not happy to do this because basically, can't you just put back what you took away? Well, we're not going to be in that position, so we need to come up with something. So I think it's important that we're heard in that.
So I'd like to thank Eliza for volunteering to help me lead that session now, to make sure the voice is heard. Eliza, you're absolutely right. We've listened to this point. Everything from here on in will be shaped with schools because there's no point us offering something that's not needed. So that commitment of meeting with all maintained schools very early in the new year will be to listen and then to shape the offer that hopefully we will then be able to provide. We know we're not doing replacing what we used to have, partly because colleagues that have all just left the room would come and throw a constructive dismissal claim at us, rightfully so. And actually we might not need that. I think that school improvement model, as we've currently got, shaped by yourselves with us, I think that will be the best solution. So I completely agree with you. We'll come out and we'll listen and then we'll develop exactly what it looks like.
Yeah, and also I'd suggest with Ben in that is also talk to the wider sector, to the academy sector. Everyone has a duty to work and help improve the system. And there's a lot of expertise, including within academies out there, that can provide help and advice. The local authority accounting system is slightly different, but not much, not that much at all.
And Jeff, I absolutely agree. One of the models that I refer to around school improvement, what I'd really love to be able to do is talk to people that do this job day in, day out. So if there are schools or MATs that are really effective, where we could actually maybe alleviate some financial pressure by saying, can we pay a day a week for your bursar, etc., who can model that good practice, who can do that coaching for new bursars, etc. That's the sort of model I want. I want people who are doing this job, who can walk the walk and talk the talk, because they'll be the best people to lead people through it, not outside coming in. That's the approach I would like to implement.
And I think that's the issue, is that you've got people in finance who don't actually use the systems that we use in school and then are asking our bursars and office staff to do things and they're going, but how do we do it? But they don't know. So yeah, absolutely. It has to be sector led.
Good.
Okay. No, nothing for me. Anything, Dan?
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I like Eliza have received several emails from colleagues in terms of putting forward their response. Obviously, I'm unsure why they haven't necessarily done that through the consultation process, but they've just sent me emails directly to me. I think one of the points that I would just draw on is at the moment it's very vague, isn't it? You know, we're being asked to vote on £5 per, you know, it's not 32p that we've just voted on. This is a significant commitment for primary schools, well, primary schools that I'm representing. And so therefore the ability to make an assessment against that really is on the information that we have in front of us. At the moment, we'll come out to you potentially in the new year. We'll listen to what you want, which is great to hear, Ben. But in order to be able to vote on this, you almost need to know those parameters and what those expectations are in the first instance in order to be able to vote, in my opinion. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Ben, is there anything you want to?
Yeah, I understand the challenge. I think what I've heard is this needs to be developed with the sector. Absolutely agree. It needs to be sector led. Again, I completely agree. So we need to have the conversation about what it looks like, which we couldn't. The proposal in here is listening to head teachers and listening to the response of the consultation. What I'd like to do is have the remit to say, right, now let's develop it together. So that's, I suppose, what the request is. What I don't want to do is put in here, this is the proposal that we've come up with ourselves and we think it will work, because then that will immediately say, well, no, you haven't listened to us and you're not developing it with us. So I understand the challenge of there needs to be more detail. What I'm saying is I want to produce that with Dan, with Eliza, and with other heads, bursars, governors, so we know it's fit for purpose. That's what I would like to be able to.
I mean, what you're asking is that we commit to this now, but that we're part of shaping what this is used for, which I think is only fair.
Yeah.
If we decide we're committed to this on behalf of all our maintained heads, then it's up to those heads and schools to say, actually, this is what we need.
Absolutely right, Eliza. Yeah.
Okay. And I do think this has come out quickly.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. I didn't want it to be a sticking plaster, but I know you need a decision making on it so that then we can move forward with it, that we're still not in this position in 3 or 4 months' time.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you were, if the four members were to vote for this and then it wasn't shaping up the way you'd want, then you'd be returning the money back. Dan, what's your view on that?
Yeah, I think for me, you know, based on the conversations I've had with colleagues, I think for me, that collaborative piece almost needs to be done in the first instance before you're making that decision. I think, you know, the horse is already bolted. If you agree to this, and it isn't necessarily, and schools are always going to fight in an individual way. But there needs to be a kind of a universal offer, so at least everybody knows what they're signing up to. I just don't think that's here. And although I appreciate it's collaborative, you know, you've already agreed to commit part of your budget. So, you know, for me, if you're asking my vote, Chair, mine would be to not support.
Right. Thank you.
But the question I've got then is, if we don't vote, if we say no to this, we're still going to be in the same position then, aren't we, in 6 months' time? Whereas if we say yes and we get moving with this, we've actually got somebody that's leading this.
Well, no, not necessarily, because one, the conversations and development of it can carry on, and that needs to carry on anyway, regardless of the vote. Two, there's nothing to stop it if you've got a proposal there becoming something approaching a traded service.
Mm-hmm.
Beth?
I was just going to say that this vote is to do it through a dedelegation, which is something we submit to government in mid-January. But if it's something that you need worked on and brought back in February, it could then be done as an agreed top slice from schools, but not through the dedelegation and through the budget, but through something we take before devolving your budgets to you. So it could be a locally held budget if you need more time and a proper proposal.
I just think there'd be real value if you wanted to consult and engage with head teachers in that way, Beth. I think you'd get, you know, I think you'd get significant buy-in, you know, but I think to do that as a collaborative piece in the first instance, so you know what you're buying into, I think there'd be real value in. So yeah, hence why I've obviously gone the way that I have.
I mean, there's a real need for it. There's no denying that. And heads are email saying, yes, we need something. But what that actually is, that's what I think the meat on the bone isn't there at the moment. But I think, as you know, can we defer then and then bring this back? Are we able to do that?
Yeah,
Obviously,
it could be
delegation
done as something that you pay into, like a traded service, but not a traded service, but also not a dedelegation.
Yeah.
It could be done through.
So yeah, you could reject the dedelegation route, but continue the discussions around how the service is provided, and then potentially through a top slice, through a different mechanism at a future meeting.
There is a risk then that you get less schools buying in, those who have very very confident versus who are happy with the way things are, and there are.
Well, that's the issue I've got. I mean,
50-50.
I wouldn't necessarily need some of this support, but we might need something else. But it's not about that. It's about creating a service that we need, regardless whether you've got a bursar that's experienced or not, or whether new systems come in. We need to fill this gap, and what that looks like, I don't know. That's what we've got to work on. I think that's obvious, because that's all I'm hearing from heads. It's the finance, HR, that is the area that they're struggling with. School improvement, not so much. This part of it, yes. So I do think we do need to do something. I'm just worried that if we don't do something now, is it just going to disappear again? But you're saying it's not. You're saying that we're going to work on this and we can bring it back and still get funding for it in a different way. Some heads are saying we'll happily sign up to an SLA if that's what's required. That's what heads are saying that we used to do in the past. We used to sign up to a finance SLA in the past.
I think the difficulty there, and Emily might want to come in on this, is that the decision was a member-led decision to not do traded services.
Yeah, we wouldn't be replacing the previous offer under SLAs. So
how then could we buy into this through what did you call it earlier? Sorry.
So it's,
Top size.
it would be a top size to your budget, like a delegation, but it wouldn't be through the formal budget route. So it would be choosing to do a sort of a unofficial delegation, but we wouldn't be trading.
And that would be all schools or just those schools that
Just those that would agree. We wouldn't be able to enforce it on all schools. It'd just be those who choose to take part and contribute to the SIG budget.
And I think I'm conscious we're spending a lot of time on
Sorry.
it again. No, it's okay. It's because it's important. I'm conscious one of the risks that we have is the schools that are most likely to need the financial support are the schools that will be in the most financially difficult position and won't be able to afford to then buy into something, which leaves them even more stranded, and they just cycle down into that pit of despair, don't they? Whereas doing it somewhat this way and having a formulaic approach says we've got a resource that we put centrally that we can then allocate out to the people that really need it. And I know that might not be fair to some.
I do agree, Ben, but I do think sometimes you get a person that leaves the school and they're not the sort of the smallest and the tightest funded schools. There can be emergencies that happen to any school.
Yeah,
I think it's needed, so I think we should go ahead with it.
Okay, so one in favour, one against. So where'd you go from there then, James?
Dance competition, something like that. I don't know what quite happens now.
Rock, paper, scissors.
I've got about 7 replies here, and out of them, they're all saying, yes, we need something. So, you know, and I sit with the small schools group, and I know this is something we've campaigned for. So I'm saying yes.
Okay. And just to follow Eliza, the reason that we've put this in is partly the responses to the consultation. It's also responses from Eliza and other heads, but it's in going out and visiting schools. I'm not going out and I'm not teaching, I'm not talking around curriculum and teaching. I'm going out and saying, help me with budget, help me with HR, help me with buildings. That's the conversation I'm hearing constantly. I know it's the conversation that Fiona gets constantly as an elected member. So we know this is an area that we've got to tackle. That's why we put it forward.
So through you, Chair. So this is a decision that only the local authority maintained schools members get to vote on. So the 2 members of forum. It seems to logically follow from that there's no chairman's casting vote, for example, because the chairman holds a position in which you're not eligible to vote on this matter. So, I mean, referring to the schools forum powers and responsibilities, for delegations, the local authority proposes, schools forum is the decision maker, and the Department for Education is then responsible for adjudicating where a schools forum does not agree a local authority proposal. So unless unless there is a change, any movement in the position of the 2 voting members, schools forum isn't able to agree the local authority proposal, so that would seem to go to the DFE for adjudication, determination.
Yeah. But yeah,
Chair, might just raise, and obviously it's not my vote, and I genuinely don't know how that will happen and the timescale that will happen in.
no,
So I think all I would say is the commitment from the council is to carry on having the conversations. We will have those conversations in the new year. And if this isn't a route we go down, if the DFE close that door to us or say no, then we'll come up with a different idea, but we'll carry on the dialogue. We won't sit and wait until we get that. I know what waiting for decisions from the DFE can be like. It can take a long time.
yes, yeah, indeed. Yeah, if you can do that, Beth.
I'm pretty sure the DFE will ask us for the results from the consultation on that question. So I think we will need to go out to all maintained schools and ask them to actually give us a view on that specific item.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea because you've got till mid-January, haven't you, on this one? So I would suggest on that one then, if you go out to individual schools and then we can, the results of those consultations, you can circulate to members or to myself and to the maintained members, because it's a vote on that. And then And then we can see if that brings more clarity than we've got. But Dan, I appreciate the point of view that you've got there. You do need more clarity. We do need more clarity on it. And I think also just exploring what can be provided even without additional funding, because there's obviously, I know there'll be school support and you'll be pushing that, but there is a lot of experience outside in the Academy Trust world as well that can provide an awful lot if it's asked. And I know from my trust, we talked to Beth last year, because we've got very experienced bursars that are sitting there and can provide some help in many of the areas and are willing to do that as part of our commitment to the wider community.
Yeah, I agree, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. So the
Redundancy.
the final delegation is the redundancy support, which is a bit more straightforward. Excuse me. So that's continuation of the £4 rate, and 19 agreed and 1 disagreed with that.
Okay, redundancy support. Dan?
Groups of 3 and it's 3 4 around it. But for a group of 3, then 5 and a half. Yeah.
Well, Tracy, I think you're not on mute.
Sorry.
Dan, have you got your hand up?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I was just agreeing with the vote.
Great. Eliza? Okay, that one's fine. Right, notional send options. And this, I think, is a vote for everybody.
That's right, yep.
Yeah.
So we have to consult on the notional send for the 24-25 budget for the first time. Notional send budget was first introduced with the formula, national funding formula in 12-13. And it hasn't been revisited, although there's often been a discussion about it becoming part of the hard funding formula and set nationally. So I think this is a move towards that. So we've been told we have to consult on it. And although there weren't any formal requirements of how we had to set it, there were some examples provided in the guidance. So the options that were provided, the first question we asked was, do you agree with changing the budget, the notional send budget? And 18 agreed with that and 9 disagreed. And then we provided 3 options, one which is based on the current model but without free school meals, because that isn't intended to be put into the notional send budget, and also it putting a larger part into or using low prior attainment, which we hadn't previously implemented, because again the government's guidance says that is meant to be the largest part of the notional send budget. Option 2 was using the example in the guidance, one of the 2 examples, and option 3 was the second. Of the responses, 24 agreed with option 1, 4 option 2, and none option 3.
Okay, so any questions or comments from anyone online or in the room on the notional send budget? From the respondents, there's a clear in favour of option 1, but has anyone got anything they'd like to add before we take a vote on that? No? Okay. So what I'll do is invite forum members, and it's all forum members, to vote on the proposal from the consultation, which is based around the notional send and option 1. All those in favour, put your hand up. In favour of option 1? 1, 2, 3, 4 here. 5, Dan. Becky. Against? Abstaining? Okay, anyone in favour of option 2? No, against, abstaining? No, how many have you got?
Sorry, Chair, I lost the flow of that. I apologise. I thought you. So the forum is in favour of the notional send budget changing for 24-25 based on the ESFA recommendations.
Yeah, option 1, yeah.
No, there's that.
Oh, okay.
And then you need to then the forum needs to decide which of the 3 options it supports.
Right, okay. So okay, are we all agreed that we move or disagree with notional send budget changing, first of all, before we agree on the options? Sorry, yes, everyone. Yeah, Lee. And then when we came to the options, I think the majority for option 1, thank you. Thanks, Becky. Option 1, everyone around the table. Lee, option 1, are you happy with that? Not happy with that?
I'm neither.
Abstaining.
I'm fine, yeah, I'm abstaining. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. And Dan, I think you previously said option 1 you were happy with. Yeah.
Please, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Lee. Much appreciated. Okay, that's that, I think, for those votes. Thank you, everyone. I know we took a long time around those, but there's some very, very important decisions to be made and some really, really helpful debate around that as well. So item 8.
Thank you. That's me again. It's sort of a mixture of housekeeping and information for schools. We have a duty to consult annually with Schools Forum on arrangements for pupils with special educational needs, in particular the places that we commission and the arrangements for paying top up. So this publishes the places that we've agreed and set with for academies with the DfE, which we have to do in a return in November. And I think it's also useful to see the increasing places, and that helps us sort of understand the picture of the increasing demands on the high needs budget. But this publishes the special school rates that we have based on the RAS scores, the resource allocation system, the proposed rates for next year that we'll be implementing. It looks like a very generous increase, but that is slightly misleading. There are protections in the funding that special schools receive, similar to primary and secondary schools. And one of the ways we've been implementing those minimum funding guarantees over this year and the year before was to add protection rather than to increase the RAS rates. So some of this is just basing, so some of the 8.15% increase there is just baselining that protection through the RAS. So there's no way we could take it away from them, because it's part of the rules that you know per pupil rate has to increase by so much percentage each year. And this is just baselining a lot of that. And also this just applies to approximately half of the special schools budgets, because it's top up, whereas they get top up in place. So although 8.15% looks generous, it's not really.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Beth on the high needs budget 24-25? No. No. Okay. Yeah. All right, I'll go back to item 7 then, the early years budget. Katie, have we got Katie there? Oh, you've been Katie today, yeah.
Very poor impression of, obviously. Just really quickly, we've only just got information from the DfE, so far too late to actually get out to consult or put any formal papers through the board. Absolutely clear how important getting this right is. So we'll model some consultation questions. We'll get them out to all colleagues on the board. We'll have that consultation around early years funding, and we need that decision. I'm going to check with Beth and Emily before the date of our February forum, don't we? Or can we do that at February forum?
Yes, I think we can, the aim would be to consult throughout the month of January to come back to forum in February for a vote. Because I think we need to set the budgets by the end of March, but obviously providers want to know indicative rates and everything to inform their budget setting.
So too late to actually do anything with the DfE announcement this year, but we'll do that consultation in January if everyone's happy with that.
Okay, anyone got any questions? Rachel, Hayley?
There you go. Second. Only to comment again that it feels hugely unfair that, you know, I know you've only just received the rates, but it feels hugely unfair that literally we get notified them in March and we have to, you know, implement that from April, and we have no way of knowing and setting our budgets for the financial year, and I think it's appalling. So yeah, just to comment on that really.
Could not agree more. It's the fact we receive information after we've published our papers, because we have to publish them obviously in advance. It's woeful. It shouldn't be this way. And I think early years sector are left behind far too many times with the way that the DfE go through all of this consultation process. So I completely agree. I think it's great that we've got the representation in the room and the challenge in the room. Rachel's absolutely right. So we will do, you know, we will do our best. We will come out. We will do our best to work with the sector to listen to the responses, and we'll get the right decision. It's just a shame we can't do it as thoroughly as everything you've just heard around schools.
Beth, yeah.
I'd just add that we will do the modelling over Christmas and bring out a consultation in January. And although that doesn't give you the sort of absolute sort of certainty until we bring it back in February, it does kind of give you an indication of what we're aiming and what we can afford to give. So it's unlikely to drastically change from anything we release in January. And again, that doesn't give you individual budget levels, but you can apply those rates to the pupil numbers you know that you have. Yeah, and I think that's really helpful to know. I wonder how does that translate to the sector, that is sort of what to expect. And previously there has been changes from consultation to the rates that have been set. And in that time, you know, we are penny pinching all the time in early years. And, you know, even when it's a penny less from in consultation, it's, you know, it can be crippling. So I do appreciate that, but it still does have a huge impact. So, and the other thing as well, I think to mention is with the expansion of the funding happening from April, it's such an unsettling time as it is. And, you know, I think the sector would really appreciate assurance that rates are not going to be reduced, that they will be increased. Yeah, I just think that assurance from that side would be really helpful actually. Because there has been times where consultation's gone out and they have been reduced since consultation to rates being set. Thank you.
No, it's ridiculous, and it you know, it really is, particularly around mainstream schools and academies where the funding, it changes, but the indicative rates are given 12 months before for a academy and 9 months before for maintained schools, but weeks is all you'll have. Can we make an action, Ben, to if we just have a chat about how we can make representations on that, because that has to be something the DfE can look at. They know their timetabling. No one can believe it's something that must affect the whole sector, the whole national picture, and it's really not acceptable. The DfE have put out, you know, a lot of information around financial management and having strong finances and how we manage those effectively. And there's a lot of work around that, but how can you manage it effectively if you're only told what your rates are days before you have to implement them? So I think it is something that's a very legitimate way we can go back to DFE, and if necessary through the our local MPs and representatives, to say this needs to change. We need to be better at how we do this. So we'll if I work with Ben and Beth on this, then we'll do something with that, I think. Is there anything anyone else wants to say on this before we move on to the high needs project? No. Okay, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate that this afternoon's had some heavy content. I will try and just pick out some selected elements of the paper which I've prepared, if that's okay, but also leave plenty of time for questions. So the paper includes 5 sections. I'll headline some of the sections, as I say. First topic is the joint send and alternative provision strategy. Key headlines here is that this is now working. We have the document says over 130 colleagues across the partnership. I actually believe it's north of 150 who are working from across the 4 partners, meeting on a monthly basis, completing a document which then is the delivery plan, and then the headlines of that are reported at the Send Improvement Board. There's a self-evaluation framework which is now being created again across the partnership, and there's a workshop which is set up in mid-January, 17th of January, to review that. So early success is we have the engagement, and within this self-evaluation framework, we're looking at strengths, but also weaknesses, areas for development. How can we improve? If I move forward, unless there's any questions, is that okay, Chair? If I just keep, yeah. From a send ranges perspective, one of the questions which was raised last time is where is the forward-looking training plan? So the document which is on page 59 gives the information which I've received so far. This has been coordinated by the external Senkos from the Boys School and from Campion School. It does say, as a footnote at the bottom, that there are more dates to be added specifically for early years and for FE. I'm in consultation with one of the Senkos and feeding back information from the FE subgroup of the funding project of how this could be best practice for how this can be done. So that information has been shared. And that particular Senko will then contact the key people within the sector. So which is the best way to leverage the training for that specific sector. We anticipate more dates to be added. I think that's the key headline, and I'm on page 59. Appreciate I'm going a little bit at pace. With the chair pre-meeting, one thing which we talked about was visualization of the trends. So you have a selection of slides here which actually show the applications since lockdown, which also coincides with the West Northants Council, just by coincidence. So on slide 60, and I will make several comments on specific slides, if that's okay. This takes the total picture of applications which go to a panel. So it's either an EHC panel, or it's a panel for early years non-EHC, which we refer to as targeted send funding, or school age non-EHC. There is no specific panel for FE. And the red line is not added by me. The red line is added by the software, which shows a trend line. And as everybody knows, that trend is increasing from bottom left to top right. But on the slide 60, it shows it as a grey bar slide. The next slide, 61, then breaks it down into the colours. So again, there's no FE for non-EHC funding, but the FE is included in the green bar. Now, slides like this are very, very difficult to read. It's a number of coloured bars, and then what I've then done is broken it down into more detail, and then headline a couple of topics on each of the slides. So on slide 62, this is EHC. It's all age groups. It's from early years right the way through to FE. Ben mentioned a little while ago, about the assessment backlog. Yeah. If you look bottom left on that slide and you look at as we came out of lockdown, April through July 2021, and you can compare that to the last 4 or 5 months, top right, that is where you can see an increase in applications of around 30%. And that is what you referred to earlier, Ben. And that is where the backlog has come. And if you take the active months, which are not the summer months, the applications or the RSAs have increased, where the partners looking at these, it's over 100 per month.
Do you have a breakdown, or will we be able to get that information of how many applications are from schools and how many are from parents?
Yeah,
Because I do feel there's a lot of parents who are going against schools and saying, well, I'm putting in for an EHCP for my child. I've had quite a few parents putting their own applications in. And then we just get informed when we get the letter to say that it's going to statutory assessment. So it'd be interesting to see how many parents are putting applications in for their children.
Okay, yeah. So that would be parents and settings. Yeah.
Yeah. Dan, you got a question too?
Yeah, apologies, chairs. Sorry, Andy. Sorry about my alarm going off in the background. Do you want questions at the end, Andy, or are you happy to go slide by slide?
I'm quite happy from a forum perspective. It's been a heavy session today, Dan. So please.
Is that you take it easy on you?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So if I just go to page 61, the slide with the EH and non-EHCP plan new applications since April 21. More specifically around the school age targeted SEND funding, that is obviously significantly greater than, just looking at it observationally than any other month. Is that a fair statement to make?
Sorry, so
on page 61,
yes, yeah, it is. Yeah.
So I was just interested to know whether there is any analysis further along in terms of how many of those were successful in terms of their applications. So obviously we're seeing a significant increase in terms of requests, but what does that then mean? Because obviously we're in a significant deficit in terms of high needs, and therefore more applications are going in that are going to draw upon those funds. I just was interested to know what the percentage would be in terms of those that are potentially successful.
What you have to do, Dan, is break it down to the 3 individual sections. If you take and if I give an average over the period of time, I have an average, but I don't have the more recent change. So from an early years perspective, with regards to the non-EHC funding,
yeah,
it's 69%. So approximately 7 out of 10 are successful.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
From a school age, it's 82, and from a EHC plan, it's 56. Whether that is increasing or decreasing, we'd have to go and look at that in more detail.
No. I think that's really good context in terms of, so we know the quality of applications that are being put in. 83% would imply that the applications going in are of a, I'm just coming back to full circle to Ben's question around the practice within schools. He said, it was questionable. So if you're suggesting that 83% are successful in terms of funding, I would suggest, therefore, that is good practice, doesn't it? It supports that rationale around those schools that are delivering the high quality education that we want for our young people. So that was the reason for the question, Andy, nothing more than that.
No problem, Dan. And the 82% is, I have to be specific because it did the percentage vary, but the 82% is for let me just check, just bear me. I don't misquote myself on this one. 82% is the school age. 69% is the early years. I think I said it the other way around. I'm not a lot of numbers, but whether it's 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10, it does infer, as Dan said, that the quality of applications means that the panels can make that decision because it's worked in partnership. And if we take then the spike in demand, where you look at October and November in recent times, what we've done is we've spoken to our subgroups on the project to try and get some anecdotal feedback, and cost pressure is key here. When we talk about specifically on slide 65, we're looking at school age. The the number one feedback was there's increasing pressure on schools. Everything is costing more money. We are now making this application because we can't afford to fund this from within existing school funding. There's also some other topics around that, in that an increasing demand on reception classes, because these are the children and young people that were toddlers during lockdown and are now reaching school age. And also we talked at the last forum about year 6. There's also the year 6 demand ahead of transition. Certainly, Ben. Sorry.
Dan, just to add a little bit more context to that. We're working with all the local authorities across the east of England to look at, do we make, is our decision-making process appropriate, our thresholds right, etc., and what's the demand coming through? So at the moment, if I just think of new requests over the last 12 months, both Northants and West Northants are massive outliers in the fact that we have a much higher percentage of requests per population than any other authority in the east of England at the moment. So we know it's really high in terms of requests coming in. What we then know is West Northants is the lowest in the region at saying no. So we say yes far more often to statutory assessment, not to issue HCP, but to statutory assessment. We say yes much more regularly. So there is a question for us about, do we need to say no more? Now, if we say no, that pushes things back into school, creates and all we know is we'll get a reapplication and it will lead to that child's needs not being met. So at the moment, that causes a financial burden, but we believe it's the right thing to do for children. What we also know is once we're into the assessment process, we are very low in terms of going through the assessment process and saying no. Now, that's the league table I want us to be at the very top of. I agree. I think if we agree to go through that statutory assessment process, we should know that the vast, vast majority end up and we issue a plan. At the moment, just about 5% of our plans that we assess, we say no to. If I look at places like Nottinghamshire, they're up at 18%. So you take a family through a 20-week, let's hope it's 20-week, but 30+ week process, and then you just say no at the end of it. So we're doing all of that benchmarking at the moment to make sure our decision making is right and appropriate. The big elephant in the room for us, we know, is if we say no around an EHCP, we know there isn't enough of that early help support to pick those children and families up. So I think that's one of the things, and I believe that's why both Northamptonshire stand out at the top of that first table that I talked about, because we know if we say no, we are saying no and closing a door. We've got to help those families. So I think we probably are saying yes a little bit more too often. That's more than happy to go into a lot, because there's a lot of analysis going on at the moment to make sure that we're in the right place, obviously as part of that financial recovery plan, which comes second. First comes, are we meeting kids' needs? And we know we're not there yet.
I think what I would say just in response to that, Ben, is although you said maybe we say yes too often, but I would want to go along the line of, if the applications are as such, which are of high quality, hence the targeted funding, then they are being, they're being agreed accordingly. And the same I would say would apply to the request for statutory assessments. If they're, if the requests of a significant quality because they reflect the child's needs, then ultimately that has to be the right thing to do, hasn't it? Morally, and for the good of the child, it has to be the right thing. So, although it may be high, it may also, and that doesn't necessarily help finance, but at the same time, we're talking about what's right for the child and the family. And so, if that's deemed what is the right thing to do, then I think, I think it's a good thing. And I'd also, just to provide, because although I shoot lots of challenge at Schools Forum, I do know that in terms of the panel process around both targeted funding and the EHE funding is improving. There is far more representation on both panels. So again, just for the purpose of the minutes and to recognise that I know that work has been undertaken and continues to develop further.
Just one more quick comment and then I'll let Andy carry on. And thanks for that challenge and the comments back, Dan. What we know, I've said it here loads of times before, but what we know is we're starting from a very low base. So in West Northants, school census tells us there's nearly 2% fewer children with SEND support than the national average. Go back to that point earlier about we've got 7 schools that don't have a single child in with any additional need. We're challenging that. So we know we're starting at a low base. So the more we challenge around identification and assessment, the more we're going to see a massive throughput of new assessments coming in. great, because it's right, because we're meeting children's needs. Help, because we don't have the budget. So that's the situation we're in. And I know, and Fiona says this to us regularly, we know we have to balance the budget, but our primary focus is children and meeting their needs. So if we see that curve continuing to go up and we are increasing at a higher rate than everywhere else, that's the right thing to do. And I think we will see that. I think Emily and Beth have both hinted already at, we know that 4.4 million is not where we want to be. We know that's going up, and that will go up for the next couple of years at least. Because we've got that catch up to do to make sure needs are getting identified and being met. And the longer we wait, the more those needs will escalate. I'll get off the soapbox.
Thanks, carry on.
On the non-EHC funding, one thing to note is that instead of asking the providers to fill a completely new form in every time, then when the funding period finishes, we now introduced funding continuation. So on the early years, you can start to see that arrive around about July, August, as a claret colour on the slide. From a school, and that now brings it in line with the school age. Just for clarification, there are some big spikes on the school age because we had a system where all of them finished at the same time. So the second year of funding, all the applications came in at the same time, which is why you've got spikes and troughs very much. What we're doing now is to smooth the curve. We are looking at this as a rolling 12-month period. So going forward, if this was to be looked at in 2 years' time, that then will be a different picture. I just wanted to clarify that because I look at it and think that's a bit strange. So I wanted to explain that. Can I move on to send additional capacity? Just pick out a couple of changes from last time. We've added in FE. We took one school off the list. And what we've also done is then broken out, whereas last time we talked about 55 children across the estate of Hunsbury Park and Chiltern combined, and we've broken that into 3 sections. And in the pre-meeting with Chair, what we've also done then is added in a timeline. So you've got visual slides which show when, looking from a calendar perspective, just a different way of looking at the same information, when this comes online. If it's open, it's green. If it's planned, it's yellow. There will be changes. There are some TBCs. And as this progresses with forum, then we will continue. If that's the type of slide that works, Chair, we can add that detail and just update it and pick out the changes. If that works for forum. Sorry, that wasn't a vote. It was me just trying to say it takes time. If it's not useful, I won't do it.
Just to add one more layer into that. So this, I'm glad people were saying yes to that. What we will overlay with this information is that need profile. So we know there is a growing need in key stage 1, autistic diagnosis, etc. Therefore, by that year, we need to have created X number of new places. So we're not just doing places, we're doing and how it meets the need that we know we have. That's been something that's been sorely missing. And I think I'm being Shazzy around Katie today, and I'm woefully prepared to be either of them. But Shazzy will bring a lot of that modelling through this meeting in future.
Yeah, no, that would be great. I mean, the one on additional capacity, the one thing that did strike me is there's a lot of good work gone on, particularly within the mainstream schools for the unit around primary. And obviously those kids are growing up, and there doesn't seem to be the same development as secondary.
That was the point I was just trying to make. Yeah, cool, you're absolutely right. And sorry, put that on. There is a hope and a drive. I'm very sorry, I've just looked up and I've just seen a comment on the screen. So Becky's got to go, I think. So am I allowed to quickly, Becky, I know it's your last meeting. Thank you for everything you've done for this group and wider as well. We're very lucky to have you, and good luck.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Becky.
Sorry, I wanted to do that under AOB, but she's going now. So, there is a drive for lots of children that are in units in primary school. If we do the job right, then we should be equipping those children to go into a mainstream secondary school. But we know that's not real in all situations. So there are some secondaries that we're expanding. Obviously, New Tiffield will create a lot of capacity at secondary age as well. But we know that is a gap. And we have a real pressure right now of a number of children in units that we do not have a suitable school place for in year 7 in September. So Paul, you're absolutely right. That's a really big area of focus for us.
And if I can add from an FE perspective, at my prior meeting, before coming to forum today, that was a question that was raised by Northampton College, which was, can you give us an idea of what's coming further down the line with the needs profile?
Yeah.
So that was actually raised late morning. Yeah. I'm going to move forward because I appreciate there's a lot of content and people need to go, but please, I'm not offended if you leave.
No, there aren't any more votes, thanks.
Shall I continue,
Yeah.
Chair?
Yeah.
It's great to hear from Dan that the positive words about the panel process improving. We are working on application forms for early years, for school age, and also improving the RSA form. So that's all work in progress. We've had co-production, including the settings for each of these, and we're currently on test with a view to then upgrading the online forms in the spring. So that, again, so it's great to hear the feedback at this stage. If I move on to the money side of things, and I'm referring to slide 72, and this gets a little bit complicated, but I will keep it as simple as possible. If I talk about the targeted send funding side, we have referred to, Ben mentioned the late confirmation from DFE. So we were hoping to have a rate, but that's wrapped up in the same topic. From a mainstream schools perspective, on the targeted send funding, that's then wrapped up in the discussion with regards to the DSG and the recovery plan. So it's part of that consultation. If I look onto the right-hand side, and I'll come on to FE in a moment, from an the education banding tool, the RAS system, we are still doing evaluation on the monies. What Beth showed was the rates for special schools, or the proposed rates for special schools for 24-25. We are looking at then the links to the special schools with regards to the early years rates and the school rates. And it will be remiss of me not to talk about FE. We've had deep discussions with the representatives of the sector within the project team, and what we've agreed is we will continue with the current process, the current allocation for a further year. So we will not look at any changes before the 1st of August 2025. That allows us to learn. This is one of the things in consultation with the other local authorities we want to do, is make sure we learn what's changed, look at and implemented best practice, but we will continue to do the work, and we'll look at it in parallel, and if you like, it as a shadow system for FE. And finally, if I move forward to another couple of slides which I've added, we talk about the RAS rates. We haven't completed the process. Let me put this into context. There are over 3,500 EHC plans now. And the number changes every week as we get the assessments complete. What the graph on slide 74 does is it just shows the profile of the first 2,300. And what it shows is that the bulk of the needs are 4, 5, 6 on the ranges. You have the higher needs, if I say 8, 9, and 10. And the higher needs are generally the children and young people who are either in a special school or within one of the units within mainstream school. And equally, you have some people who have some lower needs at 1, 2, 3, some children and young people 1, 2, 3. If I just, as a final slide, look at slide 76, this is now looking at breaking it out from and separating the special schools from the rest of the bands. Now, the special schools within this project are phase 4, because we already have the RAS bands in place for the special schools. We're missing 1,000 on that slide because we're looking at them further down the line. Our focus has been on early years and on school age first, because it's already working in special schools. But we want to make sure that all children and young people, we complete the same documentation. It's the same trained team of caseworkers, the same officers, and we're doing 100% moderation. I think I covered that before. And as a team, I think my numbers, if I just take this summary 1 second, the caseworkers since July have completed 2,600, which is no mean feat, and the officers 1,700. these are big numbers, but we are sure that we're looking at trained caseworkers, we're looking at officers, and any exceptions we're then revisiting to make sure, I think I said at the previous forum, that we don't have to do this work twice. So appreciate there's a lot of content there. Appreciate you've heard a lot of my voice over the last few minutes. Maybe there are any other questions?
Can I
Sorry,
just add to that last point? I think so the approach to look at every plan is one that has created a lot of discussion, shall we say, within the council. What we've agreed, and we have agreed it with everybody involved, is that it's the right thing to do. So it's looking at, we've got to look at quality. We're not just looking at money, we're looking at the quality of the plans to make sure that for any new system that we go into, we put the best quality in, we'll get the best quality out. So that is putting a lot of pressure on that team, but we believe it's absolutely the right thing to do. I didn't want to just take a 10% cut and just go with that because the variation is so great. We're looking at 0 to 25, the massive complexity of need. So we decided to do it all. I think that's a really important point. It's being done as thoroughly as it possibly can be done.
Lovely, thank you. I know we're not no longer core, but we haven't got a vote on this anyway. Are there any questions for Andy?
Can I just ask Andy, Dan mentioned earlier about an indication of where the plans come from, whether it's parents or schools. Is there any way we could look at that? That would be quite interesting anyway. Not necessarily for preschool children, obviously, but for children who are in school now to understand why parents felt they should apply when school perhaps didn't. So we need to have a look at that kind of work, I think.
Yeah, certainly. We'll look at the source of the applications.
Fiona, what we'll do, someone's going to regret me saying this, but we will do it because it's the right thing to do. We'll look at the source of applications and the percentage that are then approved as well. Yeah. Because we know there will be parents who are electively home educating children or whose children are not in school at the moment that will put applications in, that's fine. But we'll look at that so we can map across. We want schools directly involved at the beginning. That's the way it.
Yeah, well, that was my point, really. I think that's the way forward, isn't it? Rather than just yeah, we need to understand that more.
Yeah.
I'll try and, again, to make it simpler, I'll look at trying to visualize that. So we can look at some lines on slides rather than tables on this. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Andy. Any more comments? No. Forward plan, I think, is next, James.
Nothing to add, Chair. It's as it appears on the agenda.
Okay, if anyone's got any comments or if there's no comments on that, obviously the early years, we've said that the early years consultation will happen in between meetings to come back to the meetings. I think that was the main thing in between the forward plan there. Yeah. And to help reach out into the sector, which I know we've had conversations before.
And if I'm allowed to suggest, with Councillor Baker's links and sort of profile in this area, that we arrange a meeting or we have at least start some dialogue directly with Andrea Ledson, who not only is local MP but is also leading on all of the very early years and children's centres and family hubs, etc. So we'll try and set a meeting up. If not, we'll get into that dialogue, and that will be. I'm nominating Rachel already. I'm just saying you're joining us. I think it's really important that we go with the sector to have that conversation about the pressure that late funding creates and the pressure in the sector already. So we'll do that if that's okay. Yeah, and we'll bring the outcome of that meeting back here.
Yeah, and yes, if there is the opportunity, I'd be happy to support that as well, to join that with you.
I'm on it.
Super. Okay, is there, if that's all on that one, if there is, I haven't been notified of any urgent business. I can't imagine anyone's got anything urgent now. So thank you very much for your participation, everyone here. It's been a long meeting. I know there's been a lot of things to work through. And I thank you for your patience with me in when I jumbled up the agenda for you. I'd like to say that is just to make sure everyone's awake and understand. But thank you very much. And when it comes, I hope you have a lovely break. Thank you.